tell me about the very first time you went to the track, how that felt. Well, the experience, what happened? Was it a good day? Was it a bad day?
It was an awesome day. So it was a ride day at Oran Park. Midweek, I think I didn't chuck a sickie. I took a day of leave because, you know, the guy I was working for was running a bike shop. He knows what's going on. But it was great. I loved it. It was so much fun. I did that. Towards the end of the day, the bike seized at the end of the straight. I went flying through the kink at the end of Oran Park into turn one, and it just went all silent, like two strokes do. I was lucky I didn't crash. I just pulled the clutch and it went skidding off the end of the straight. When the engine cooled down, we sort of freed it up and ran it a bit richer and kept riding. But yeah, it was good. But it made me sort of go, yeah, this is what I want to do. I went to a stay upright course shortly after that at Amaroo Park, when that place used to exist as well. Yeah, and that was good. Dry in the morning, rained in the afternoon, so burning around in a wet track in the arvo. That was probably the beginning of it, me really wanting to, when I say wanting to race, at that time it wasn't wanting to race, it was just more wanting to be on a racetrack. The racing thing came about a little bit after that, and again, and it was by accident too. It wasn't really a deliberate action to start racing.
And I guess as far as racing goes, I mean, what do you love about it? What's the one thing about being on a racetrack that does it for you?
It's hard, there's no one thing. There's so many things. The big thing is being able to use the bike. You can say use the bike to its capability, but that's crap, no one can. I can use the bike to my capability. I can push it as far as I dare without having to worry about looking over my shoulder for a cop or a speed camera. I do like that all the people are going the same way. And I love the competition and the fine science of getting it all right, getting the bike set up right and getting head in the game properly. I like that it's largely a mental game as well, that I've got to be in a good headspace to get it right. I've been at the track where I've not been in the right headspace and I may not crash, but yeah, you don't ride well that day. Also, like, God, I've made some friends over the years, and well, not enemies, but yeah, people that you love to beat, but people that you love to race with as well. Yeah, riding around on a racetrack on your own is nowhere near as much fun as when it's full of people that are all got the same thing in mind.
And I guess, you know, it's like you're saying there, I mean, bikes in general, it's not just about the bikes, it's about the people in the community. I mean, you're a car guy as well, but what are your thoughts on bike passion versus car passion?
One of the ones that I'll call it the most memorable, and this was interesting. So a guy that was, I guess, a hero to me as a kid was Freddie Spencer. And I got the opportunity to meet him 5 or 6 years ago. For a period of time, I was on the committee of the Post Classic Racing Association, and they were running the Barry Sheen Festival of Speed at the time. And so then I was on the committee for that and helping run the event. And in 2016, we got Freddie Spencer out here as the big famous star person. He's exceptional at doing that. He's just the nicest guy. He uses his fame for good, not for evil. He's a wonderful bloke to deal with. As a kid, I built the little Tamiya model of his bike, and you could buy the little rider and paint him up, and then as a typical kid would do, I sat on the road and took photos of it, tried to make it look real. I lost those photos through time, and then they resurfaced again when my mum cleaned a photo album out one day, and then I lost them again and they resurfaced again. But then when I found out he was coming, we found them. I got him to sign them. Told him the story about how I built him as a kid and all that other stuff. And off the back of that, I sort of became friends with him, so we have stayed in contact. Not heaps, but a little bit. We talk occasionally on social media. But in terms of the best race, the following year he came back, and there was a whole lot of riders that year. There was Kevin Schwantz, and now I've forgotten the rest of them, which I shouldn't, but I have. But there was, at the beginning of a race, he was taking my tyre warmers off, which my wife got a great photo of, which was amazing. And while that was happening, a camera crew was putting a camera on the bike, and it got me out in the race late, and to the point where I had to do a pit lane start. And I was starting from pole, but we did have the camera on the bike, and we got it all on footage. I think we counted, there was 38 bikes in the race. I think we counted 22 passes on lap one. I ended up coming second in that race. So it was a 5-lap race, it wasn't terribly long, and I went barging through the crowd. Didn't seem memorable at the time. I lost the chance to win the race because it was a feature event, had a big trophy on it, all that sort of stuff. But at the end of it, he actually said to me, he goes, if you'd have just rode out on the grid and won that race, you'd probably never remember it. He goes, but you'll remember this one forever. Yeah. He goes, this will be the most memorable race you've probably ever done. And he was right. Yeah, it's fantastic. But to hear that from someone like him was probably added that little bit more to it.
You know, motorbike riding is generally referred to as being sort of very much a freedom and stuff like that. And I think, to me, bikes are used a lot less for commuting. There are people who do it, but most people have bikes for enjoyment. I mean, what are your thoughts on owning a motorbike other than racing and stuff like that?
Oh no, like owning a road bike, yeah, with the exception of commuting and delivering pizzas, it's purely a passion thing. There's not a practical part of that decision anywhere. Despite what people think, they're not terribly cheap to run. You get wet, you get cold, you get hot, you get all these other, you get dirty, dusty, but it doesn't matter. It is purely passion driven. Anyone can drive a car, and you can drive a car and be passionate about that too. It's easy to drive a car and not be passionate about it and just accept it as A to B. I don't really think that's a thing with motorbikes. I think with motorbikes you have to be passionate. If you're not, you're kind of wasting your time with it a bit, or it's becoming a bit of a pain in the butt for you. In terms of community, and I'm in so many around that. There's obviously the racing community, and I've been in it for a long time, and a lot of other people have been there for a long time, and other people come and go. So there's long-term friendships and rivalries. There's always new ones coming along as well. The last time I bought a road bike was sort of at the height of the custom cafe racer scene, and I bought myself an XJR 1300 because all these people were building dirt tracker style bikes out of SR 400s, and I went, well, that's a lovely idea, but why not a big fat 4-cylinder monster of a dirt tracker? So I did it with an XJR 1300. And I took my son for a ride one day and he wasn't interested, and I took my daughter for a ride and she was. And at the time she was 12. And so the bike was going to be build it, show it a few times, sell it. But because she developed such an interest, this became cheap daddy-daughter time. So I hung onto the bike for sort of 4-ish years, and we were spending a lot of time on the weekend riding around together. And that was great. And that only sort of faded away, which became sort of 16, 17, and it's officially uncool to be caught out in public with your dad. So yeah, so then the bike started to sit around a lot more, and then we moved it on.
Right, so as far as racing goes, obviously you've got your bikes here. Starting with this one, I know that's your primary bike, but I mean, what's going on with this one here?
Look, that's something I've wanted to do for a long time. So is this, I guess. But I spent a long time riding small capacity bikes. I was on 400s for 10 or 15 years, and it was great fun, and it really taught me how to ride and how to set a bike up, because it was all just corner speed. But then I never really got that, lunatic horsepower experience. So I built this one first, because this is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. But then after riding around a bit on this a bit and sort of settling in and making good friends with that, I went, no, I wonder if I'm not too old for a proper super bike. So I picked up the last generation blade off a mate of mine, and just went, I'm going to give this a go. At the moment, it's still pretty stock. Engine stock as a rock, but I'll do something about that shortly. It's about to get a whole lot of new suspension from YSS in the next week or two. So I've had it for a year, pretty much left it as I bought it, and I've just learned to ride. And that's been great, because that's like teaching an old dog new tricks. Learning to ride in a more modern bike in a more modern fashion, and learning how to park it and shoot it, but in a scientific fashion, not just stop it and ride, yeah.
The Firestorm over there, I mean, give me a rundown of how it started and what it is now. I mean, it's pretty wild.
How it started? Yeah, this started in my head about 20 years ago, and it started with a Japanese magazine, and on the cover of the magazine was the Moriwaki VTR 1000 with those pipes sticking up the back and the blue paint job, and yeah, that was when the VTRs first came out, and I thought they were a pretty cool bike anyway, and then I saw that and I was, one day. About 4 years ago, I picked up a $1,500 wreck that became this. It's not really the same bike, it's a grandpa's axle. I think the fuel tank might be the same, might be the frame as well, but that's about it. But yeah, it was always to build that Moriwaki style superbike. And along the way, while I was building it, I think I posted some photos up of some stuff I did, and an Englishman contacted me via email, a guy named Roger Ditchfield, who I didn't know from a bar of soap. Just asked me whether I was going to race it or build a show bike or whatever, and I said, no, I want to race it. We've got a classic series over here that it works in. And then he introduces himself properly as the project manager for Moriwaki from 1995 to 2005, and his primary project was their VTRs. So he wouldn't sell me any parts, I tried, but he was a wealth of information, gave me cam grinds, chassis information, all the different stuff about their different generation bikes. So yeah, it probably saved me a lot of swearing and crashing and blowing up motors in the process too.
And I mean, so what have you kind of done to this as far as, front to back, suspension, wheels, power?
Lots. Yeah, power-wise, so they gave me the rundown on sort of 3 power plants they used. They had a 115 horsepower engine, which they said will run all day, every day underwater and in space. They said it was easy. He gave me the specs to build a 125 horsepower engine, which he said is a great engine. They'll still go a good couple of years for a rebuild. And then he said everyone talks about a 135 horsepower engine. He goes, but that was 12 laps. That's all you get out of those. And then they start twisting cases and winding up. And so we didn't really use that one all that often. But yeah, he gave me a couple of specs for cam grinds. He told me that if we use the JE pistons and I machine them in this fashion, they become the HRC piston because they were a copy. He gave me a few tricks to do with the clutch, a few things to do with the transmission I haven't done yet. But yeah, it belts out 125 horsepower. It's reliable as the sun. Fantastic. But in terms of the frame's stock, and I considered bracing it, but again, with his good advice, it saved me a lot of time. He said, don't brace it, they chatter. He said, just let it bend. So I do that. They had an Öhlins front end in their bike with Öhlins triple clamps, but I was able to replicate that in terms of geometry and action. So their forks out of a 95 Fireblade, and the brakes are off a 929 Honda, and the triple clamps are out of a 2004 CBR 600 RR. The wheels I just scored. That's a story unto itself, but they're a set of vintage 90s Japanese forged aluminium race wheels. They weigh a couple of 100 grams each. They're bloody fantastic. Yeah, and the rear end, it's a stock swing arm, but it's, yeah, again, don't a Fireblade, cut the brace off a Fireblade swing arm, welded it on. That was what Moriwaki were doing before they started to get the Spond and stuff. And it's worked great. I cut it up and welded it together myself, and yeah, hasn't cracked, hasn't moved, hasn't done anything weird, so yeah, it's kind of worked out.
And I guess, I mean, what do you love about riding that and riding a V-twin as well?
This bike is just my friend. It never hurts me, it never tries to bite me, it just loves me and I love it back. And I don't know why, yeah, it's great. It's fun. The class I'm in, it's called pre-modern superbike. So it's all bikes from 1990 to 97, up to 754s and up to 1000 twins. So really, I'm in a sea of GSXRs and ZX7s. But yeah, it's good fun. It's agile, punches out of corners. It's being a twin, it just soaks up all of my mistakes. I'm not really too worried about throttle control and grip. Everything it's got, it throws down on the road really well. It's great.
So I guess what are some of the wins you've had on that? Like, you know, races and class wins and stuff like that? Yeah,
last year I won in the PCRA, which is the New South Wales series for historic bikes. I won the Superbike and the Unlimited class. We only had 3 rounds because of COVID last year, but still, win's a win. And I've had a bunch of individual race wins here. There's some pretty stiff competition in that class. There's one guy in particular on a ZX7 who's very hard to beat. And given when we're at Eastern Creek, I can't beat him. He is so fast, so good at riding his bike. Wakefield Park's a little different. This bike really performs well at Wakefield. The big 4 cylinders spend a lot of time standing still, spinning their back wheel, and this thing just hops up and goes. So yeah, it's good for that. I've had quite a few good wins down there. Done a few 1-hour endurance relays on it where I share the bike with someone else. We've won a few of those. A few of those have gone pear-shaped as well. The last one had ended up upside down, but that's all right. Straighten it up, paint it, and off we go again.
And I mean, obviously you love that bike so much. If I was to say to you, if you had the choice of taking that bike to Suzuka, Circuit of the Americas, Laguna Seca, Cadwell Park, where would you go?
All of them. Yeah. I think Laguna would be pretty cool to ride. Yeah, I'd really like to do that. The Circuit of the Americas looks great, but Laguna's, I know Suzuka's iconic as well. I also believe Suzuka's got some walls that I want to look at.
Really appreciate you spending some time with us and letting us into your workshop, so cheers.
No, it's my pleasure, mate. Glad to have you here.
No worries.
BendixMoto. Ride with confidence.